Many people are asking, should I rent or should I buy a house in this economy? That's exactly what Stephen and Jackie asked me recently when they moved here to Gilbert, Arizona because of a great job opportunity. Stephen and Jackie really wanted to buy a house because they wanted their own place to do whatever they want with, and they wanted to build equity over time. Renting a home was just a backup plan because they knew owning a home was better than renting over the long term. However, they both had concerns about buying a house in this crazy market. So Stephen was worried about falling housing prices, and Jackie's worried about rising interest rates. But there's a third thing they should have been thinking about, and they weren't at first. But I will get to that point at the end of the video, I promise. For now, let me go ahead and tell you their story. So here's what's going to come up in this video. 1, prices are falling, but keep it in mind. 2, interest rates are rising, but did you know? And 3, don't forget to consider before buying or renting. Getting back to Stephen and Jackie, they asked me what they should do. And here's what we talked about. So Stephen's main concern is that he's buying a house at a time when housing prices are falling. Obviously, we can all see that. You might even have the same concern yourself. The important thing to understand is that there are 2 primary forces that drive prices in any market, and that's supply and demand. As you probably already know, in the real estate market, supply refers to sellers and demand refers to buyers. So here's what I shared with Stephen. Our supply of sellers has been much lower for the last several years. There are many reasons for this, but the important thing to note is that many people are holding off selling their homes, and they have been for a really long time. Check out this graph to see what I mean. This is the median home sales price in the East Valley of Arizona. So the East Valley in the Phoenix area is going to refer to Chandler, Gilbert, Mesa, Queen Creek. 2022 started off at basically $499,000 as the median home sales price. The homes that were included in that number obviously went under contract a month to 2 months before January, but that's where it was. Then prices kept climbing and peaked out at $560,000 in May. We are now at $527,500. Obviously, this is going to continue to go down as we face a tough economy with rising interest rates. The best example of supply to show you I have is the active listings. And this chart shows from 2001 to 2022. The main years I want you to focus on are really 2001 and 2003. And then 2014 to about 2017. And then you have this year, 2022. Everything else on this chart is somewhat of an anomaly. Right before the 2008 crash started in about 2004, active listings actually did go down. And then the amount of listings that hit the market went way up because of that crash. And this is Gilbert data, by the way, but every other city in the Phoenix metro area looks about like this chart. So we're going to use this as our example. Highest there is 2740, September of 07. Ever since then, we've been on an overall downtrend until you get here at about 2020 and 2021. Those are really, really low supply levels. And as you can see right now, obviously we've ticked way back up in 2022. We are still ticking back up into what are more normalized markets. Real estate professionals would consider 2014 to 2016 a fairly balanced real estate market. Yes, we are getting more homes coming to the market, but not drastically so. The reason why this is going up is because homes are taking longer to sell, not because tons more homes are hitting the market. And that's more in line with what you would see in other years. What I want to show with this graph is that we still have a ways to go to get back to what are considered more normalized levels. We are at right now 933, so we're under 1,000. Average was more like in the neighborhood of, let's say, 1,200 to 1,500. Right now, people may not want to move because they don't want to get a higher interest rate and they want to sit on the sidelines. But that is building up demand because people will want to move. They will want to sell to get a better house, a smaller house for a number of reasons, but they're not willing to do anything right now. So as the market sorts itself out, those people are going to want to move more and more and more. And the second they can and they feel confident in doing so, you're going to see things get better for our market. And I think that this chart will hopefully show that to you. Prices are falling, but keep demand buildup in mind. Demand buildup will push prices up again once buyers re-enter the market. So Jackie was concerned that interest rates are going up. And it is true. Interest rates have now more than doubled since the start of the year. We all know that the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates to try to severely reduce inflation, but they still have a long way to go. Rates are likely to stay where they're at or even go up slightly over the foreseeable future. We've all gotten used to artificially low interest rates for the last several years. Let's take a look at this graph. I wanted to give you some context on what the history of mortgage rates look like. So this is from Freddie Mac, which goes back to 1971. That's when they started tracking this stuff. And this chart goes from 0% all the way up to the high of about 18.63% back in 1981. This is right before I was born. I was born in 1982. If you averaged out this chart, if you were to take 1971 up to about 2002, your average is going to sit somewhere around 10 to 12% on mortgage rates. From 2002 to 2018 or so, your average is going to be closer to 5 to 7%. We'll call it 6%. But we got artificially low here down into the twos. And that was because the Federal Reserve was trying to stimulate the economy to prevent us from going into a recession due to COVID-19 and the pandemic and everything else. The point is that we are returning to normal rates. And as the rest of the economy adapts to a more normal interest rate rather than an artificially low rate, buyers will begin entering the market again. We're not there yet. Housing prices are going to come down still. Interest rates are going to go up a little bit. But we're not as bad off as the media would like you to think. And this is something that I explained to Jackie by showing her the history of interest rates. Let's say you're buying. You may get a rate of around, let's call it 6.8 to 7.2%, somewhere in that range. Rates could still go up and get up to maybe even 8%. If they do, then you're going to be really happy you have a lower rate. If rates go down again, let's say the economy gets under control faster than we all think. I don't think that's going to be the case, but let's just say it did. If rates go down, then you can refi your house and get down to that lower rate. So if they're raising, you're in good shape because you got lower. If they go low, you can refi and you're still okay. Interest rates are one of those things where I wouldn't worry about that too much. Instead, worry about your debt to income ratio. What's your monthly income? What are your monthly debt payments? You want your mortgage cost to be roughly around 28% or so of your income. As long as you're in that number, you're okay and you can afford your home purchase. Sure, we all would love to have a 2.8% mortgage rate, but that was an anomaly that was not normal, as you can see from this chart. If you missed out, you missed out. But don't let that stop you from buying a home and building equity over time. Interest rates are rising, but did you know they're returning to long-term average levels? Adjusting to it is hard, but it will get easier as the economy adjusts. And now for the thing that I promised you, the thing that Stephen and Jackie really should have been considering since the beginning. Most of the buyers that I work with tend not to think about how expensive closing costs and repairs can be when buying a house. You can literally spend tens of thousands of dollars more than you originally planned on. Let me show you. To show you what buyers overlook oftentimes when they're planning to buy a house, I went ahead and Googled average buyer closing costs in Arizona. Now, some of these initial things are not including everything. The first thing I see in this list that actually does include everything is on this Houseo.com website, buyer closing costs. It says a buyer pays at least 2 to 5% of the purchase price of the mortgage or refinancing closing costs. That number is usually closer to 3%. As a quick note, closing costs can include loan origination fees, escrow fees, taxes and insurance, homeowners association fees, and more. So let's say you've got a mortgage cost or a mortgage amount of $450,000, okay? And you multiply that by 3%, that's $13,500 in closing costs right there, okay? So you're already in the tens of thousands of dollars to buy a home that you usually don't think about. Now, let's say you get a house under contract as a buyer, and that home was built in, let's say, the 90s or maybe even into the early 2000s. A large amount of our home supply here was built in the 90s and the early 2000s. A lot of buyers buy a home, and within the first few years, they end up having to replace the AC. So I Googled AC replacement cost in Phoenix, and this is right in line with what I typically see in the marketplace here. Some of these things are for installation costs, putting in the entire system. You're not really going to need to do that most of the time. You're going to replace the air conditioner itself. And that replacement cost, according to this site, Scottsdale Air Heating and Cooling. Stay calm, stay cool. Basic air conditioner replacement cost will run you between $3,500 and $12,000 for the biggest residential units. The number is usually $8,000 to $12,000. We'll call it $10,000 to replace the AC system. It can go up from there if you get, the most expensive units or you have multiple units to replace, but that is something to be aware of. That's another 10 grand on top of the closing costs that we're at. So now we're in the neighborhood of $23,000 that a lot of buyers are not considering when buying a home. Let's do one more. Roof. In Arizona, our roofs tend to last usually 25 to 30 years. Now, the tiles themselves, we have cement tiles. Those will last really indefinitely as far as I'm aware, as long as they don't crack or break. But the underlayment underneath does need to be replaced. I just Googled Phoenix, Arizona roof replacement cost. This number is a little bit low here. What I'm usually seeing is right here on the azroof.com, it's telling you $10,000 to $20,000 in 2019. Costs have gone up a little bit since then. You're probably going to be in the neighborhood of $15,000, maybe even up to $20,000. That's a pretty fair assessment of what new roof costs are here. Now, obviously, it's going to vary greatly. Are you in a two-story house? Are you in a single-story house? What is the square footage? There's a lot of factors. The point being, this is going to be at least a $15,000 cost that you may be walking into when you buy a house. So now we're at almost $30,000 of costs that a lot of buyers don't consider. That's something you really need to keep in mind. Now, the reason I make this point, and then I made this point to Stephen and Jackie, is that this type of market, a buyer's market, is a place where you can get the seller to cover most of these costs, if not all of them. Sellers right now that need to move are desperate. They know that the market is not what it was 6 months ago, and they're willing to make concessions to get the home sold so that they can move on. They were willing to pay for closing costs outright a lot of the time. They're willing to do more aggressive repairs than normal. If they know their AC is on its last leg, if they know their roof is looking to be replaced soon, they will usually do something to give you the credit to offset these costs. So instead of walking into a $30,000 cost as a buyer, you might be walking into zero to somewhere under $10,000, which is a much better situation than you would be 6 months ago or before. So there are some positives in this market. Don't forget to consider upfront costs like closing costs, repair costs, etc. before buying. Many sellers will cover some or all of these costs in today's market. So in the end, Stephen and Jackie decided to buy a home. They plan to be there for the next 3 to 7 years. And while nothing is a sure thing, they realized history has shown us that markets do recover and home equity does go back up. They're confident that buying a home now puts them in a better position several years from now. Housing prices will find a bottom and they will start to go up again. Interest rates will normalize as inflation gets more under control. Demand and supply levels will improve. All the buyers and sellers that have been waiting on the sidelines will re-enter the market. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I believe that the risk of buying a house now is small compared to the loss of not owning a home years from now. The market has changed even more since Stephen and Jackie bought their home. Click here to watch this video about the market today.